Hey everyone, and welcome to this very special edition of the Decks of the Week. This video marks the 100th time we've come together to discuss the best decks of Marvel Snap, and before we get started, I want to take a second to say thank you to each and every one of you that has contributed so much to making my dream of being a content creator a reality. From the viewership, of course, to the likes and the subscriptions, but most importantly, the thing that really stands out to me is the kind comments, the encouraging comments. They serve as motivation for me to keep doing what I do, to keep putting the best effort I can, to give you the best content that I can. And I just want to take a second to say that it is so unbelievably appreciated. Each and every one of you. Thank you. Let's talk about the decks. We start this week talking about Scream. Now, it's a little unfortunate because Scream doesn't actually crack the top 10. It's in the decks of the week because it is a bonus mission, and I know people are really interested in Scream. It's a really cool card. Now, Scream itself is fine. It's a good card. The challenge is that the decks themselves are not overperforming compared to some of the others. It's also worth noting that this week we're doing things a little differently. It is the first week of the season, so as we started a couple seasons ago, we're going based off of cube rate. We're also including some bot-based statistics based on what is Untapped is providing us on the trek towards infinite for most players. But what I will say is that these decks just are performing as well as you'd expect. And it's likely because Scream is good, but the supporting cast, if you don't draw Scream, like what, you just Polaris and just move stuff around for fun, that's kind of the challenge we're in. And I'm expecting some more experimentation with these Scream junk-based decks, where you can actually use Polaris to like junk their side with a rock and move it over, White Widow. Those will likely start to get brewed to a little more success. But as of right now, this is currently the highest win rate version of Scream, so if you're looking to get that weekend mission done, you can. Still a lot of experimentation happening. It looks like Scream itself is a very powerful card. The supporting cast needs help. The decks themselves need help. And so we'll have to see where those go. But I mean, in the trek towards infinite, you're looking at a 64% win rate and a 0.94 cube rate, which sounds amazing, but again, remember, that is on the trek towards infinite. Then we go to our top 10 here. We do have Agent Athena. Now, this is running a 60% win rate and an entire cube on average. I mean, listen, bots get feasted on. But the key thing here is that you do have the hood. I do like the hood and the Agent Venom play because it actually acts as a massive power swing. Right? It's basically a 7 power swing, and then you get the demon as well. You also have Bast. What's really interesting about this deck is that you have Agent Venom for the deck, Bast for the hand, and then you got a whole bunch of value plays. And so, like, you have the Kitty Pryde Athena package. Of course, you can hit Iron Man. No Mystique in this particular deck, but an absolute winner's Mysterio, because if you have Mysterio and you Bast it, that's pretty good. 3s across the board. If you don't have Mysterio, you Agent Venom it, then draw it. 4s across the board. Mysterio is one of your carry cards here. I really like this deck. It performs very, very well. It plays very fun as well. And obviously, you have that Hint Monkey splash for that like big closer near the end when you're looking to slam down some points. The deck performs really well. It's one you can go to if you're looking for like a kind of like interesting approach to playing Athena and Agent Venom, of course. Then we go to our number 9 deck, and it is, surprise, surprise, it's Clog. Now, this is amongst the more popular decks right now in terms of play rate, 61% win rate and a 0.104 cube rate, performing very well all across the meta on the trek towards infinite. We do have a, you're seeing this deck, right? You're clogging with the debris, you're clogging with the acid arrow, you have the White Widow, you're playing Titania into the Green Goblin, clogging the location. Then you play your Dr. Octopus. You got the Cannonball for turn 6 if you have to. You got the Red Hulk. It's like this deck you're seeing, you know how to play it. If you're interested in making everyone's life miserable, you can definitely continue playing Clog. I would expect Clog to be a bit of a target for upcoming patches and the OTAs. Not because I think that it's too oppressive. Like, you can just play Destroy, which makes the top 10 now because of the popularity of Clog. And that's like the rock, scissors, paper meta in play, right? If Clog gets really popular, what's the release valve? It's Destroy and some other things, right? So we're seeing those decks be successful in the climb towards infinite, and as a result, Clog is relegated to 9th overall, while still honestly putting up impressive statistics. As we go to number 8, J Negative is not a deck we often talk about, and I think one of the key things about this deck is you're noticing a low win rate, but a very high cube rate. That's indicative of what Mr. Negative does. Tends to go very high, very strong, right? The key thing about this deck too is it's going to feast on bots. There's a couple decks that are like really advantageous against bots and taking advantage of the way that their AI is programmed. Mr. Negative has almost no board presence going into turn 5, right? Very, very weak board presence. If anything, your best line is Renslayer or Psylocke, negative on 3, now you're at -1, and then you play Magic to extend the game. They go into turn 4 or 5, they snap, and you're like, okay. And then you play Jane Foster, and your whole hand is filled with insane things. You crush it, right? And that's kind of what this deck does very effectively. I think that against high-end players, it's very unlikely anyone's going to stay into a turn 3 negative into a turn 5 Jane Foster. They're just going to retreat. So get that early snap in to take advantage of the situation. But generally speaking, this deck absolutely claps, but it's unlikely it'll remain in the top 10 as we get more player versus player infinite statistics. Then we move on to Tribunal, another deck very similar to very similar to Negative. It has Negative in it. This is a very different flavor of playing Mr. Negative, though. Once again, it does the same thing the prior deck does. Has a very, very kind of weak upfront play. It baits the bots into snapping. They snap. You steal their cubes with Tribunal onto, Iron Man and whatever, right? Mystique and etc. And you put up massive power across the board. Still effective against players as well. It's also worth noting that this is one of the decks that does perform relatively well against Hela. You simply put up such a wide gamut of power that Hela's RNG, and especially if they don't draw Luke Cage, does result in them generally underperforming a Tribunal deck that hits its lines. If you're sick of Hela and you don't want to play against that deck anymore, and you just want to beat Hela and continue to climb towards Infinite, this is the deck, honestly. You can play Clog too, but this is going to be one of the decks if you don't want to play Clog, because it simply will outperform a Hela from a pure stats and numbers perspective, and do it pretty consistently as well. This is a good option. Just know your retreat lines, which is why it has a 56% win rate. Number 6, Agent Bounce. We have another Agent Venom deck, and Agent Venom's been very good, by the way, and Cozy and I will talk about it on the Snapchat. Definitely a very strong card. It's going to be worth picking up if you're interested in the Season Pass. And now this is a straight up bounce deck. I do love the Beast inclusion, obviously, for it's bounce. You got to have the Beast there, right? You got the Falcon too. But it's Werewolf by Night that finally makes these decks, right? It's been a while since we've seen Werewolf by Night actually start making progress towards getting into a couple decks here. Running a 64% win rate in a cube, basically, right? At a cube 0.08. It's a good deck. It's doing very well, and Agent Venom just, it slaps in these situations. It's also worth noting, we got Black Swan in this deck too. When was the last time you saw Black Swan being unironically played? Well, it's here, because what you can do, you play down Black Swan, it's basically has to be activated, and then when you Falcon and you activate Black Swan, because you're hitting all these 1-drops with Falcon and Black Swan's an activate, it's essentially like you've beasted them, right? They're free, and that's great. And then you're able to kind of play them all down, and then hit Monkey as well. And obviously your Werewolf's bouncing back and forth. Sage gets additional value based on how you stack the powers, right? Very fun, if hard deck to learn how to play, but very rewarding if you want to take the time to learn how to play Agent Bounce. It's a good one, and I think that this one's going to be a lasting one in the meta in the next couple of weeks. And that takes us to the release valve of Clog. If you're hating Clog right now, which is entirely possible, I mean, you probably are, unless you're playing Clog, and then that's a whole other story, but you're going to want to play something like Destroy. A 64% win rate and a 0.114 cube rate. This is an excellent deck. The key tech here that's made a little different, which has kind of pushed it to the top, is going to be Alioth coming in. Now, why is there an Alioth? Well, because you want some counterplay towards the Hellas. There's a good chance you gain initiative with a deck like this, and you might even be in a position where you destroy X23, etc., etc. You have a big Deadpool, and you have Alioth you can play. Death might even be free as well. You also have the Null you can play as well, right? With that X23 you take out X23, you got that 7 energy on turn 6, you got the Deadpool Null, but you also got the Deadpool Alioth. If you can predict where the Hela is going to play, it gives you a fighting chance against Hela, right? So anyways, this deck also performs very well against all the Agent Venom decks because of the Killmonger. The only challenge is Agent Venom, with all the bounce mechanics, tends to throw priority, which can make hitting the Killmonger a little more challenging. So timing Killmonger is something that you kind of got to practice depending on the types of decks you're facing in your pocket meta and the types of Agent Venom bounce decks you tend to be seeing, okay? Just bear that in mind. But overall, Destroy is back, partially because it just does really well against Clog. Clog doesn't matter. It cleans up all the Clog BS, right? You use Carnage to get rid of rocks and Widow's Kisses and the Goblins. It doesn't matter. It just doesn't matter. So Destroy, a good call in the current meta at number 5. As we go into our top 4, a brand new brew here, and we do have Onslaught Surfer. This deck came to us from Splat, and I think that TLSG kind of popularized it quite a bit as well. But ultimately, it's an Onslaught Surfer deck, and its win rate is a little on the lower side. It's a 57% win rate, but it actually has amongst the highest cube rates currently going in the meta. And the only reason why it's not in the top 3 is because its cube rate is so significantly lower than the others. I made a judgment call to say like, hey, this cube rate's insane, but the win rate is a little lower than the others, like a significant amount at 57%. So that's why I put it at number 4. But honestly, the deck slaps, and I think people have been having a ton of fun with it. It's basically like you wave and then you onslaught and then you Sarah on the onslaught, and you basically have this massive miracle turn where you're like, hey, I can do whatever I want here. I can play every card in my hand pretty much, right? And so it's a really fun deck to play. Tons of actions on turn 6 now that Sandman's gone, essentially, right? So it's a really, really, really fun deck. So if you're looking to try something very, very spicy, very, very new, this is the one of the week, okay? And you're gonna get to infinite using it. Look at that cube rate; it's absolutely cracked, okay? We'll have to see how it kind of handles the actual competitive meta into infinite and beyond. But overall, what a brew! I do like it quite a bit. And that takes us into our top 3, and we've got Move Machine. This is a new rendition of the classic War Machine control style deck that saw you play Storm into War Machine into Legion into Infinite when no one else could play anything. Now, yes, everyone rolls their eyes when they know the Legion's coming out now. No one's being caught by surprise here. But what's interesting about this deck is that movement shell. Not only do you have Madam Web, which is kind of funny to think that Madam Web has done very well outside of like traditional all-in move decks, just because like being able to rearrange your board is pretty useful. But you're not just doing that in this deck. You have Aranya, you do have the Iron Fist, the Ghost Spider, and of course Dagger. And Dagger gets so big that it's kind of like, okay, we can just use Dagger, generate some value, and then just do our usual thing as well, right? It is crazy how much of an impact a Dagger can have. So it's just a pure stat stick, and you do have Dagger, the Infinite, and others, but other than the Infinite and Dagger, like, you don't go very vertical with this deck. Don't forget you have Vulture too, which with Aranya, Madam Web, and just like 1 or 2 movements, like, it's massive as well. So a lot of vertical power, and this deck does really good at kind of like, okay, I'm going to take the control elements of the War Machine deck and the pure power side of the movement-based deck. And oh, you can't Shang-Chi me because all the locations are shut down or whatever, right? So really interesting deck, high-performing one that you can definitely take to infinite. And that takes us to number 2. It's cringe, but it is hella. And when it comes down to cube rate during the leveling process, or the infinite process, I should say, again, much like the negative decks, bots don't have the opportunity to really read the state of the board particularly well. They don't identify that, oh, they're playing Hela, right? And so they tend to snap ineffectively into your Hela plays, which is great. Your ability to kind of scam cubes from these bots is a major reason why the cube rate is so high, as well as the win rate, because generally speaking, Hela win rates should be lower. If you don't draw your Hela, you're basically screwed. There's no way you're going to win the game, but this deck finds a way to have impressive stats because, again, you're leveling towards infinite and bots don't read these board states properly. The other thing worth noting here is that in past weeks, Hela's win rate and cube rate did not crack the top 10. So in pure infinite stats, player versus player, Hela seems to be kept in check. Now, it's not engaging to play against, it's still pissing people off, but it is not the like detrimental meta force from a win rate and cube perspective that maybe some people were expecting it to be. However, still, as you can see, it's performing very well in this first week of the season. And that takes us to our number 1 deck of the week. And a reminder to just double check to make sure that you are subscribed to the channel. I would sincerely appreciate it. It would mean a lot to me. We are on our climb to 100,000 subscribers. It would mean the world to me if you climbed along with me as we go to our number 1. It's Phoenix Force, and I love this because it is, honestly, it's my favorite archetype in Marvel Snap right now. I cannot get enough of Phoenix Force. 63% win rate, a 1.40 cube rate. Whether you're playing players, whether you're playing bots, whether you're playing Ben Brode himself, you can win games with this deck. I love Phoenix Force. I'm becoming an absolute Phoenix Force stan. This deck just slaps. It is so good, and I cannot get enough of this. Even during Twitch drops, we're playing tons of random stuff, and I'm like, I just want to play some Phoenix Force. Guys, can I play some damn Phoenix? Everyone's like, yes, play some Phoenix Force. And we crushed it. crushed it with Phoenix Force. So honestly, this is the deck you want to play if you want to get a little sweaty. But don't fret. If you're new to Phoenix Force, yeah, you're going to lose a bunch of games at the start, but you'll get the hang of it, and then you're going to be like, now I get it. Thank you so much for watching, guys, and we'll see you on that next one.